All that stuff that only exists in legends and bedtime stories. Talking tigers, spaceships, and magic swords that can make a man as mighty as a god. Where I come from, that stuff is real. Why did you send me away?
I wanted you to be safe. So I sent you to a place I knew that they'd never find you. There's...
This obsession with nerd stuff and sword things, it's not a good look for human resources.
I know it sounds crazy, but that sword is gonna show me the way home.
Sir, you can't do that.
Don't worry, the sword's mine.
Hang on, it's about to get weird.
What am I supposed to do? Take the sword. You protect them.
Welcome back, everyone. They released a trailer for the live-action Masters of the Universe He-Man movie. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs here, so we'll break it all down and explain what's going on, because if you didn't realize, there is a new live-action He-Man movie. They're just calling it Masters of the Universe because that is the name of the original toy line. They released a very 80s themed promo for the actual trailer, like the teaser for the actual trailer that was meant to make you think of the original 80s cartoon too. Does it not feel like a blast from the past, even though technically Mattel is still releasing the He-Man toys in present day too? Like, there have been several different versions of the toy line across the ages, and in present day you can still go out and buy versions of the original classic designs, but made new. Everybody raise your hand if you collected some of that classic toy line back in the day, or if you still have some of those action figures. I did collect some of the original He-Man toys when I was a little kid, but my parents were pretty frugal, so they wouldn't let me collect all the different toy sets, so I never had every single one. They didn't let me get the Castle Grayskull set, and they didn't let me get the Snake Mountain set either. Those were actually two things that I really, really wanted, but was never able to get. But of course we can't talk about live-action He-Man movies without talking about the original with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella, who played that version of Skeletor. If you have not seen the original live-action Masters of the Universe He-Man movie, it is a rite of passage. I would recommend checking it out. It is a classic, but it is what it is. You could definitely tell in this new movie they wanted to find a reason to bring everyone to Earth. Like, first you see Adam being sent to Earth to protect him as a boy. So in the new mythology that this movie is going with, this version of Adam is originally from Eternia, but then is sent to Earth to protect him as he's raised as a baby. It looks like Skeletor does something and requires his friends, his allies on Eternia to go find him on Earth so that he can get the Sword of Power, become He-Man again, and defeat Skeletor. In the original live-action Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe movie, the reason why a lot of it was set on Earth instead of Eternia is mostly for budgetary reasons, like, we don't have a lot of money, how can we have He-Man just running around a shopping mall? Based on the very Thor Ragnarok vibe of the trailer, I think they're just using the Earth sequences in this movie for a little bit of comedy early in the movie, and most of the movie does not take place on Earth, but we will see if he does visit Earth again at the end of the film, or if he just stays on Eternia. Like, we might just be going to Earth for a little bit at the beginning of the movie to explain how he gets back to Eternia and why he left in the first place. but there are probably a number of familiar faces that you're seeing playing some of the bigger characters in this. Some of their faces are covered by CG, though. For instance, Skeletor is being played by Jared Leto, and he is in full Skeletor look. Like, it seems like they're not doing the Keldor version of Skeletor that gets turned more into his original appearance.
To cast a shadow.
We will get into that mythology as we dig through the trailer. But you probably recognize Camila Mendes, who's playing Tila. Idris Elba is playing Man-at-Arms. Alison Brie is playing Evelyn. That was actually a surprise. I didn't realize she was in the movie. And Morena Baccarin is playing the Sorceress. There are probably a couple other big surprises, like there are a couple familiar actors here who I didn't see listed on the casting list on IMDb or on the wiki, so there are a couple mystery characters in the background to a couple of these shots. But it looks like there are a lot of references in the trailer to the original live-action Dolph Lundgren Masters of the Universe movie, as well as a couple of the different cartoons. Like there's even an Easter egg from the New Adventures of He-Man TV show, which was the reboot in the 90s that Mattel tried to do after the toy sales of the original 80s line lagged and they canceled the original 80s cartoon. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's Easter eggs for even more stuff. Like, I think there are a couple Easter eggs here, too, for the original Mattel line as they were developing it. They even make it seem as he's raised on Earth that he winds up working at the real-life version of Mattel, who creates a version of He-Man in the Masters of the Universe toy line, but it's based on his original memories. So on Earth, they just think it's a fictional toy line like we do in real life with the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe original toy line, but to him, it's all real. There are a couple of jokes about that at the beginning of the trailer too, where like he's trying to figure things out because he doesn't know the actual truth of it until Tila, and it seems like some of Skeletor's minions show up. But even though it does seem like they go through a jump gate to travel back to Eternia from Earth on the ship, I think they're saying that Eternia is in the same universe that Earth is in, but in the context of the He-Man mythology, the Masters of the Universe mythology, Eternia is at the center of the universe. So even though Earth and Eternia are in the same universe, they're like many, many galaxies away, like hundreds of thousands of light years away. That was kind of how they explained things in the original Dolph Lundgren live-action Masters of the Universe movie with the Cosmic Key. That was all brand new mythology that they introduced for that movie, though that's not from the original Masters of the Universe toy line mythology. But just starting at the beginning of the trailer and going through shot by shot, we get the narration from Prince Adam before he's gone back into He-Man form, although we do see him go into He-Man form later in the trailer. There's a wide shot of Eternia with the sorceress in her bird form flying across the sky. We get a wide shot of the castle as he talks about his memories of Earth, which they then stop short and use a joke for on Earth, like his co-workers are like, "What are you talking about, this crazy mythology?" We get a shot of Castle Grayskull and the Sword of Power. All these different statues that the sorceress flies by near the castle are just of Adam's predecessors, the previous wielders of the power, and the previous kings of Eternia. Maybe we'll actually get a flashback to King Grayskull because the wiki mentions him, and I don't know why it would mention him if they weren't going to feature him in the movie in some way. What it seems like they're saying here is that Prince Adam was on Eternia here with his parents and everyone else, and then Skeletor attacks, and something happens, and that's why his mother sends him to Earth. So another big mythology change they're doing for this movie. When his mother, the Queen, says she's sending him to Earth to protect him, they're saying that his mother is an ex-astronaut from Earth who somehow got stranded on Eternia, but I don't know how they're going to explain that goes down. So there'd have to be some way of explaining how she travels that far across the universe. Maybe it's a wormhole explainer or some experimental technology that NASA was working on, who knows? But his mother is a human of Earth, and that's why he gets sent to Earth to protect him so that Skeletor can't find him. Then you notice his bedroom after he's grown up and he's working at this Earth version of Mattel, it seems like, with all the drawings behind him. A lot of these drawings are based on real-life drawings and concept art for the original Masters of the Universe toy line in the comic book line. If you weren't into He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it originally started with little tiny comics that they would actually send out, so a lot of the early mythology for He-Man was developed for that. Then as the toy line started to develop, they actually developed the cartoon to promote the toy line, but it was the comics, the original tiny little comics that came first. So a lot of these concept art drawings behind him here are real-life concept drawings that all the artists who created He-Man and the Masters of the Universe characters came up with when they were designing all the characters originally. Then if you couldn't tell, the obvious reference here to the he-him pronouns is meant to be he-man. He is he-him as in he is he-man. And the reason why his name is Adam Glenn, like why his last name is Glenn on Earth, is because his mother's Earth name, her human name, was Glenn. Maybe she wound up sending him to Earth to be raised by her original family before she was trapped on Eternia and then just continued living her life there. It seems like at a certain point, he just becomes so obsessed with trying to learn about his memories and find out whether or not they're real, thinking that he's going to find the Sword of Power, and it seems like eventually somebody finds him. Maybe they use it for this joke here where he goes to the toy store and he sees the He-Man toy line. I can't quite see the name on this door to the actual toy store here, but that's also probably an Easter egg too for the original He-Man toy line. Then if you couldn't tell, this standee for the He-Man holding the toy version of the Sword of Power is actually based more on the original Conan the Barbarian looking version of He-Man that they developed for that original comic book in toy line that became a big copyright issue, so they had to change the design of He-Man to avoid an even bigger lawsuit at Mattel, and he looks more like what you remember from the 80s cartoon with the blonde hair. Later, they turned him into an Easter egg that wound up being the Savage version of He-Man when he calls down the power without using the sword, and he was an uncontrollable Hulk-like, mindless He-Man who's just much larger and much stronger. But it does look like all the toys in the cases behind here that are kind of blurry in the background are all based on the original Masters of the Universe toy line designs. Then this joke about him not being able to pull the toy sword out of the hand of this standee He-Man, I think is also meant to be a joke for the original Thor movie when he wasn't able to lift the hammer at first because he was unworthy. Like I said, I think they're trying to go with more of a Thor Ragnarok vibe during this actual movie. Confirming some of my theories, behind the cashier here, the big Jim toy was an actual real-life Mattel toy back in the 70s and the 80s, so I do believe that all the other toys in this actual shop here are real-life Mattel toys that you could have bought back in the 80s and the 70s. Not totally sure what's going on here, but we go back to Castle Grayskull on Eternia. We see Morena Baccarin as the sorceress. It seems like she's trying to summon Adam back or somehow find him and bring him back to Earth. Whatever winds up happening, Teela goes to Earth and picks up Adam and brings him back to Eternia. Then we get our big Easter egg for the New Adventures of He-Man. The spaceship that she flies him back to Eternia on is based on Starship Eternia from that 90s He-Man TV show. By the time that cartoon came out, I was too busy with school and like other big things. I kind of dipped on He-Man for a little while. I didn't check back in until some of the other newer cartoons started coming out again. But you can let me know if you watched that New Adventures of He-Man TV show or if you collected any of those 90s figures from the Reboot line. But there's a reason why that was short-lived. It was not popular and they canceled it pretty quickly.
About to get weird.
They go back to Eternia. This is Roboto on the far left, voiced by Kristen Wiig, Man-at-Arms who's played by Idris Elba. Idris Elba going from one Thor-like franchise to another Thor-like franchise. Camila Mendes is Teela, and I don't know who's going to be voicing Cringer. Whatever's going on here, it just seems like Skeletor sends a couple Roton ships to go attack the castle here. Then there are a bunch of new people in the background here too. It seems like there's Alison Brie, who's also playing Evil Lynn. Not totally sure what she's doing in this form here, but next to her is Triclops in the background if you couldn't tell. There's a couple more in the distant background behind Adam here. I can't quite see who they are because it's a little too blurry, but on the far right here is Fisto. My assumption is that pretty much all the classic He-Man characters from the original toy line are in this movie in some way. Then it seems like Skeletor lands near the palace here after some attack has gone down. I'm not totally sure about the timeline and what kind of flashbacks we're getting during the movie, but it seems like in present day he's already gone full Skeletor face, like Hordak has already melted his face off. And even though I couldn't detect any Hordak Easter eggs in the actual trailer here, I'm kind of wondering if this movie is going to set him up for a potential sequel if the movie does well enough, and they do She-Ra as well. Like, it just seems like this movie is meant to be an introduction to the universe and setting a lot of stuff up for potential franchise if the movie does well. There's a really big attack that goes down at the palace. Can't tell if this is in the past or if this is in present day. Man-at-Arms seems like he gives a big call to action speech to Adam, who then calls down the power using the sword. There's a very brief shot of Trapjaw here about to get his ass handed to him here as he turns into He-Man. There's a very quick shot of Beastman on Earth, so I am wondering why Skeletor sends them to Earth in the first place. Maybe he just needs the Sword of Power and thinks that he can't get it without Adam. 99% of He-Man stories are Skeletor trying to get the Sword of Power. If you watch the more recent Masters of the Universe cartoon that Netflix did with Kevin Smith called Masters of the Universe Revelation and Revolution, they actually did a version of that, like, what happens when Skeletor actually calls down the power? What happens when even Evil Lynn calls down the power? That series also builds on the mythology of the original He-Man stories because it takes place like after the original He-Man stories took place and confirms that Teela is the daughter of the sorceress. There were a lot of theories about that back in the day, but Mattel, during any of the different cartoons, never actually confirmed it. But the Kevin Smith one, Masters of the Universe Revolution, just confirms that. Maybe there'll be some light Easter eggs in the background for that during this movie, but the movie is only going to be a couple hours long, so I'm assuming that they're going to leave a lot of stuff for potential sequels. Like, we'll just save that for some other movie. We don't need to deal with it in this movie. There's also a very quick shot of Teela fighting Evelyn, and this is what I'm talking about, where she's the daughter of the sorceress. Eventually, she can also use the same power that the sorceress has. So maybe there'll be some light Easter eggs for that during their fight here, where she's also fighting another person who can use magic. If you couldn't tell, this is actually meant to be Cringer who's turning into Battle Cat, which is why he's roaring like Battle Cat, because he's not cringing like he is when he's Cringer. Then we get the brief shot of him calling down the power in the bowels beneath Castle Grayskull and hyping up for the fight at the end of the movie against Skeletor. It seems like this actually goes down when he goes into full He-Man form and Skeletor comes for him. Then if you couldn't tell, he's fighting Skeletor here inside Snake Mountain because it looks like they're in a snake mouth with a bunch of snake statues around them. Just another excuse to get people excited to buy more He-Man toys, like, oop, gonna have to buy one of these. Every single thing in this movie is gonna be turned into a toy or is already a toy in some other form. And we get our shot of He-Man versus Skeletor, so you can let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. But if it does feel like a cash grab, just remember the original classic Saturday morning cartoons, the original He-Man 80s cartoon, those cartoons were just designed to be glorified marketing for the toy lines back in the day. That was why there was so much legislation in real life that tried to curb that before eventually cable TV kind of wound up killing Saturday morning cartoons. Really, the thing that killed Saturday morning cartoons was cable TV. Cable TV and then the 1-2 punch of the internet. Like, once the internet became a very common thing that people had access to, it was all over. There's so much going on in this trailer, so if you spotted any Easter eggs or references that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. And I'll do more videos for this as they release more footage. In related Game of Thrones news, we're in the middle of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. New episodes are every Sunday. I'm doing videos for it just like I did for the original Game of Thrones series and for House of the Dragon. Click here and here for all my brand new episodes for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.